up on this week's show, play the best football game ever on your NES.
The full-size Amiga announced and delayed.
And we talk retro repairs and collecting with our guest, Kari Lawler.
And the Retro Hour podcast is brought to you each and every Friday with our sponsor, our great friends at Bitmap Books. Now, one book that we've been absolutely loving recently. Have you seen The Games of a Lifetime? Bringing to life a look at video game history as seen through the eyes of the legendary journalist Julian Jazz Rignall. We'll talk more about that soon, but you can check it out and order your copy and see the rest of their retro gaming range at bitmapbooks.com. And with our friends at PCBWay. Now, maybe you're going to be working on something retro over the next couple of months. You know that PCBWay offer fully featured custom PCB prototyping, low-cost, fast turnaround quality boards, and they also do services like 3D printing and injection molding. And maybe you're looking for some ideas and projects to work on. Have a look at their shared project section on their website and see just what big supporters of the retro community they are, and get an instant quote right now on their website at pcbway.com. Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 473, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
Me, Ravi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
And a very warm welcome to the show, the podcast that every single Friday celebrates everything that's been happening in the wonderful wide world of retro gaming and technology, brings you up to speed on all the big stories that have been making the headlines in the retro news from over the last week, and of course welcomes on veterans and special guests onto the podcast in the second half of the show for an interview on every single show. And this week is someone who we've been loving her YouTube channel. Actually, someone who's only been making YouTube videos for around a year. And this is Kari Lawler. Now, I'll read her description from her channel. She goes, "I'm Kari, a girl in her 20s who loves sharing my passion for making, fixing, coding, and collecting cool retro things." And I think a lot of people have been loving her channel because she gives a really fresh perspective on these systems that we grew up using and kind of sees them through new eyes. It's a really interesting angle, I think, her channel.
Yeah, and, she's got some skills as well, definitely, with repairing these. I know one of your favourite videos was the Commodore 16. Of course, that was your first computer, wasn't it?
Yeah, and breaks all the time. So it was nice to see her get one up and working again.
Yeah, and it's good to kind of see, somebody exploring it, like you said, but also somebody that's really good at coding and can explain how things work well. It's interesting to see there's like a mixture of new technologies in there, stuff like 3D printing as well. And, honestly, I think the channel's just begun. So it's really good that we can kind of get her on the podcast. And we talk about her roots as well, because, her dad and her uncle also ran like a video game and a computer shop back in the day. So there's kind of history in the family there. And, when she was really younger as well, she won like these huge coding competitions and did stuff about AI. We talk a bit about AI, and how that's maybe going to affect retro games in the future.
Yeah, and also hearing about her first computer that she used was a BBC Micro. So she kind of grew up on the BBC Micro, even though this was in the early 2000s. That was her system that she got a foundation on, and learning to program on that machine. And then we also talk about her, collecting, and also some interesting tips on maintaining and repairing old systems, which is something that obviously, as collectors, is something that we always have to deal with. A bit of a necessary evil.
And, I love getting YouTubers on the channel. It's been a while since we've actually had YouTuber on.
Yeah. We love having like-minded people on, don't we? Because there's always some common ground there as well. So if you haven't checked out Kari's channel, I'll link that in the show notes as well. Definitely worth a watch, and going to be chatting to her on the show in around half an hour from now. Speaking of online video as well on YouTube, I was actually on Amiga Bill's channel at the weekend. Obviously, we've had Bill Winters on the podcast before. He does these amazing Amiga streams every Sunday on Twitch, doesn't he?
Yes, yeah, and they're quite big as well. He gets quite a lot of views, and it's a bit like this show. He does a roundup of like the news. He plays a demo on there. He has a guest on as well. Maybe you're stealing our format, Bill. No, he's a big fan, but it's really good because you came on and you talked about VCF as well, which is where you're going. You actually going to be flying over there. So we're kind of recording ahead at the moment with the podcasts, and I think that's absolutely awesome that you're going over to America. You're going to record an Amiga panel that you're hosting there as well.
Yeah, well, I'm doing 2 of them actually, so I'll kind of bring you the highlights of them, but that's going to be happening if you're anywhere near New Jersey. I won't do the accent when I'm out there. I'll get beaten. But I'm going to be out there for VCF East, so that's happening on, next weekend. It will be one at the April the 4th to the 6th. VCF East is going to be an incredible weekend as well if you're anywhere near that area, or worth a travel as well if you can get to it. We're going to be doing a massive Amiga 40th panel with some absolute legends. I mean, I'll link up the live stream that I did with Bill over the weekend for people that didn't watch it. But yeah, I mean, we're kind of going through one by one the people that are going to be on these Amiga 40th celebration panels, and a bit about kind of what they did on the Amiga back in the day.
I think this is going to be a gathering of, Amiga developers and people involved with it that, we've not seen the likes of in years, Yeah, it's going to be absolutely stunning.
And just for me, going to be able to kind of meet some of my, heroes that I've never spoken to before, which sounds weird, but people I used to read about in magazines back in the day, people like Gail Wellington, who was an icon in the Amiga world and was kind of the mother of the Amiga, really, was one of the people who kind of set up that launch with Andy Warhol and Debbie Harry.
You're just going to nerd out.
Oh, my God. That's the thing, because these 2 panels I'm doing, they're about an hour each, and each one's got about 5-6 people on them. And like Bill said over the weekend, he's like, you could easily do like an hour-long panel individually with each of these people. So
to be honest, it's going to be hard, to moderate it and basically have, you ask one question and they'll probably go on for that whole hour. Yeah.
Well, I'm doing it with a really lovely guy called Dave McMurtry, which if you don't follow his Facebook group and you're interested in Commodore or the Amiga, you need to. He runs a group called the Commodore International Historical Society. And there's some amazingly obscure and rare things on there. Like the other day he had, because a lot of the Amiga developers and Commodore people, they often will go in their garage or their attic and kind of find old documents and scan them and send them to Dave, and he puts them on archive.org. The other day I saw they put up a fully finished Amiga 300 manual.
Well, I know one of the guests has the Ranger chipset there as well.
What was that?
That was an experimental chipset for the Amiga as well, and I think it's in Dale Luck's shed. So
Dale Luck's going to be there, yeah.
He might be bringing there, and I think he might have the original wire wrapped Amiga boards as well. So
the prototypes.
You might be able to see some absolutely amazing things there.
I'm already thinking, the Wayne's World thing, I'm not worthy. I'm already feeling a bit like that, starstruck. But yeah, so definitely join Dave's Facebook group. I'll put that in the show notes as well. If you're coming to, if anywhere in that area next weekend, you're coming to VCF East, please come and say hi. I'm really excited to be there. Now, before we get into our chat this week, our special guest, Kari Lawler, who's coming up on the podcast, let's have a bit of a chat about what's been happening in retro from over the last week. Kind of starting with something that Amiga fans, I think pretty much every Amiga gamer had a copy of this back in the day. Even me, someone who's not into football in the slightest, but actually this is one of the few football games that I could actually play and enjoy. I'm, of course, talking about the legendary Sensible Soccer. Did you play Sensi much back in the day, Ravi? I've got a feeling it sounds quite up your street.
Yeah. I don't think you're doing it justice there, because Sensible Soccer was one of those games that was the football games at the time. Everybody,
it wasn't just on the Amiga, was it? Yeah.
No, everybody loved it, and it was just competitive football before FIFA took over. There were other games out there, of course. There was Kickoff, there was Striker, there was quite a lot of other titles, but Sensible kind of ruled the crown for me and for many other people, I think, in the UK and kind of throughout Europe, especially where these football games were really popular. But we're talking about the Nintendo Entertainment System, and having Sensible Soccer on there, and a copy's actually been found of the NES port, which is absolutely amazing. What do you think of this, Joe?
Yeah, it's cool. I'm only with Sensible Soccer. I only remember ever playing the Mega Drive version a couple of times at my mate's house, and thinking this is the only football game that I enjoy. But I actually enjoyed it because I liked the graphics on it. And in my mind's eye, from watching this video of the Nintendo version, that's like how it looked. Like it looks like how it should have looked. But I imagine if I was to compare all the different versions, the NES version would probably look a bit more primitive, which is partially why it was cancelled. So this is actually a cancelled version, which was 6 months into development in 1993. But it was decided that the port wasn't up to standard. And as well as Sensible Soccer being a huge game in the UK, the NES just wasn't selling at that point. The Super Nintendo was out, the Mega Drive had been out for like 4 years in the UK, obviously Amiga and everything. So they decided to cancel it. But however,
I was going to say, like, regionally, do you think that affected it then? Because, it's very popular in America.
Yeah, I think this could have done quite well in America for 1993. The NES was still going relatively strong there, but it was dead in Europe by that point, let's be honest. But yeah, I think it looks cool. It's definitely cool that it's been found because it's such a legendary game, which was ported to so many different systems. Yeah, and
to me, it's like Lemmings or something. It's one of these titles that just
came out
crosses over from the system and comes out on everything, and everyone just wants to play it.
Yeah,
it's even on the Atari Jaguar. That's how many ports it got.
Well, interestingly, it's even on the Game Boy, and this is where the port has come from because of the Game Boy version was being developed by a guy called Mark Greenshields, who was also working on the NES version, I believe, at the same time, or he was asked to work on it at the same time, and he worked for the same company who was porting it, and that's...
Enigma Variations.
There we go. But yeah, like they say, it just wasn't destined for full release, but in those 6 months he was developing it, he did actually get essentially the full game running and working and ported. There was just a few glitches in the game, apparently. But for the most part, it was there. It was done.
Now, this has been resurrected and saved by Frank and the hardworking team at GamesThatWeren't.com. And it tells a bit more of the story there. Yeah, apparently, Mark was working on the NES conversion, but it wasn't announced in the press or the magazines or anything at the time. So it was it's kind of a bit of a shock to a lot of people that it was even in development. And apparently, he was using the original Amiga code as a reference.
Okay.
Now you can actually download the ROM to play if you've got like an EverDrive, you want to play it via emulation. And there's also a video that Games That Weren't have put up on their YouTube channel as well that you can watch. And looking at it, I mean, obviously Sensible Soccer, it doesn't have the most high-end graphics in the world. So it doesn't surprise me that the NES can run it pretty well, but the frame rate on it looks really good. That was the one thing I was thinking, will it be a bit slow? But actually it looks like comparable to the Amiga, and obviously there's lower color palette, it doesn't have quite the same palette that the Amiga does. And the sprites are a bit chunkier, and the audio, I think, is where it's really different. Obviously using the NES chip, not the Amiga's Paula audio processor, but it's kind of cool to see it though, because I think I've got a feeling if this had come out a few years earlier, it probably would have been a hit.
If it was smooth as well and played well, yeah, it's got to have those key components.
It looks smooth.
Yeah.
And also, being able to curve the ball and kind of do all of that. They could have added extra stuff like the management in there and substitutions and stuff and, cleaned it up a little bit. But it looks there. You're right, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, there are apparently a couple of glitches in it, because obviously it wasn't finished. So it you might find a few things that are wrong with it. But it looks pretty good from what I can see. I mean, it's just, again, it's one of those, like you said, a little bit too little too late, by 1993.
Yeah.
But yeah, really cool to see. So if you want to get hold of that, it is available now to download, and you can watch a video too. I'll put those in the show notes.
A big shout to sensiblesoccer.de as well, because, they've been holding competitions around the world playing Sensible Soccer, and they're still updating it as well. So the Sensible Soccer 2425 version is out, which is insane. So it's got all the teams updated on the rosters.
That's really cool.
They've got online leaderboards as well. So definitely check out that site.
Whenever we go to retro events, there's always a corner of a few guys just playing Sensible World of Soccer somewhere, isn't there? It's a tradition.
With a little trophy.
Yeah. So yeah, good to see Sensi's alive and kicking. If you want to check out the NES version, I'll link that up as well. Have you had a look in your loft lately, Joe? Anything interesting up there?
Yeah, today actually, my wife went up to the loft to get a suitcase down, but didn't find anything anything more interesting than that, unfortunately.
Not a Nintendo PlayStation kicking around in the shadows then?
Sadly not. Not in my cupboard either.
Well, it turns out another one's been discovered. Now, I'm sure everyone knows about this story, the Nintendo PlayStation. It was a collaboration between Sony and Nintendo back in the early 90s. Essentially, it was a CD-ROM drive, a CD-ROM system for the Super Nintendo, wasn't it? That got cancelled. Then Sony did their own thing, and obviously we know the history went there. But there was a prototype of that discovered good few years ago now that sold for the price of a house.
Yeah.
Back in 2020, $360,000. And a lot of people thought that was the only one in the world, but turns out there's another one out there.
Yeah. So, you know what's crazy? This story about the Nintendo PlayStation and everything, it was 10 years ago now. It was 2015 when it was like all kind of like revealed and like, here is one and somebody's got one. And
I remember that Reddit thread and everyone thought it was fake.
Yeah. And then 5 years since the fella sold it, like you say, $360,000 he sold it for. But I do recall at the time, and I can't remember who it was who said it, somebody at PlayStation or somebody who was involved or something, there was a rumor that there was 4 or 5 of these actually knocking about. And as it turns out, yes, you know, there is more of them, and one has been discovered this week. And I haven't seen this, like, on social media or anything. I spotted this on Time Extension. I thought there'd be a little bit more of a buzz around this. But interestingly, I've not, unless I've got my blinkers on, you know, and I'm just not looking in the right places, but nobody seems to really be talking about it. I thought this is quite a big deal. But maybe it's just because it's kind of like, oh yeah, of course he would have one. But as it turns out, I believe he's the former CEO of Sony Computer Entertainment, Ken Kutaragi, who was known as the father of the PlayStation. He was like the head of the PlayStation project when Nintendo pulled out. You know, it fell into his hands and he got the PlayStation launched and everything. So it would make sense that he has one. But essentially what happened was a photographer has, you know, gone round to his house, a videographer and photographer, to do some work. And Ken just busted it out of his closet and was like, have a look at this, which I just think is absolutely fantastic and would make sense. Like I say, that he would have one. The head of PlayStation at the time would have one of the prototypes. But yeah, he let this photographer, Julian Dominansky, I think how you say his name, he let him have a play with it, let him, you know, take some photos of it, etc., and even signed his PlayStation 1 for him as well.
That's cool.
Which I think is cool. But yeah, turns out Ken has one. Which, like I say, I guess maybe the reason this isn't news is it comes as no surprise that the head of, you know, Sony Computer Entertainment would have one. You know,
it looks a lot cleaner than the other one. Like, you know, there's less yellowing. Maybe he's been retro brighting it before he got it out. But yeah, it looks really nice, and I think this is interesting because obviously I don't think this guy's going to sell it. You know, being like,
I don't think he needs to.
I don't think he needs the money.
Yeah.
No. You know, so it's probably not undervalued the other one, but I think maybe it could have some interesting stuff on there.
Yeah,
hey, maybe has he got a stash of games? You know, or they took the emulator image off the last one, didn't they? And they kind of dumped it all the information on there. Maybe there's some updates on here or something. Who knows?
Yeah, it could be a later version, couldn't it, of the motherboard? Yeah, and the firmware. That's an interesting point. The only thing kind of missing on it, the play button, because there's some physical like CD controls on it in the picture.
That, yeah,
yeah. I mean, yeah, it wouldn't be a hard thing to replace. But yeah, that photographer and journalist Julian, he actually posted it on X, a picture of Ken's Nintendo PlayStation. It's a cool looking system. We saw it at Retro Mesa, didn't we? Last time we went out, they had it all set up.
Oh, did they?
I think so.
Games. Yeah. Did you guys? Did you not see it?
Sorry, I missed it. Yeah. What's that? Right. Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, right at the back of the room where they have all the other systems set
What's
up.
that? It's an Apple Pippin that.
No, it was kind of not really behind a barrier, but I don't think you could go up and kind of touch it. But it was yeah. So interesting looking machine. I mean, that's the thing. I know there have been like a couple of games made for it because, like you said, Ravi, there is an emulator available for it now as well. But really, I mean, it didn't have much more capabilities. It wasn't really like even up to the standard
This
of like,
emulator is brilliant. It just plays Super
Yeah.
Nintendo games.
That's it, yeah. It's literally just a bigger capacity Super Nintendo storage, where I think it had a bit of extra RAM, to deal with CD-ROM buffering, but that was about it. It wasn't like, the Mega CD that had like extra capabilities. So, very cool to see. And I imagine, Nintendo have got to have one in their archives somewhere as well, probably in Japan.
I don't know. Maybe they, what Nintendo are like. No, we don't want this, and just destroyed it or something.
Or maybe they can't show it. Like you'd think that would be a key piece of the museum, but maybe there's some like legal deal surrounding it where they can't show it publicly.
Yeah, Nintendo probably definitely do have one actually.
Yeah, they generally do have a pretty good archive from what I've heard.
But the guy whipping it out of his cupboard kind of can just go, yeah, go on.
Yeah. That is a cool flex, isn't it, for a retro gaming fan? So if you want to check out that picture of the second known Nintendo PlayStation, I'll put that in this week's show notes as well. Speaking of very cool things that we've been checking out this week, I always loved Wipeout, even though the first Wipeout, I think, was a real benchmark of a game. Obviously, I remember first seeing it in the movie Hackers, when they had that kind of prototype version which Angelina Jolie kind of pretends to play in the arcade. Even I remember seeing that and thinking, God, that game looks cool with the futuristic space ships racing around. And obviously we had that, really hit at the right time with that proper banging dance music soundtrack containing some legends of the industry back then. Really a game that I think helped define the PlayStation as a cool console back in the mid-90s.
Yeah, the soundtrack, the whole game, getting Design Republic involved as well. And, that was really when it kind of hit the clubbing scene.
Well, I used to buy Mixmag and stuff like that back then. You'd always see adverts for Wipeout and they'd talk about it in the news section and it didn't feel out of place. So.
No, and also it felt very demo-y to me as well. Like, going through tunnels and these kind of like sections, like, we saw demos for years of like, the PC scene and the Amiga scene and stuff, and you'd be going through these tunnels and you'd have patterns and textures and stuff. And Wipeout seemed to kind of embrace that, which was really good.
Very hard to control that first one though, wasn't it?
You just didn't have the skills. Yeah, you needed to get your air brakes and your shoulder buttons on it. Yeah. It was tough, yeah.
I tried to play it again a year or two back and I remember getting so frustrated at it. I remember the later ones like Wipeout 2097 being a bit easier to control. But the reason we're talking about the original Wipeout is because now it has been unofficially ported, and I've got to say it's running very nicely on the Sega Dreamcast.
Yeah, this is really good. We're seeing so many Dreamcast ports at the moment, and a lot of the titles are like, oh, I don't think they could have ever done it on the Dreamcast. Wipeout, I think, yeah, actually, this seems like a port that kind of should have happened, but maybe with that PlayStation drive behind it, and it didn't happen. I don't know if there was a history of it trying to be ported. It looks really nice. It looks like it runs well. Of course, there's a difference in polygons, isn't there, of how they're drawn.
Yeah, well, I think I've got a feeling that probably the first Wipeout game was just a bit early to come out on the Dreamcast, because it was already like 4 years old at that stage, wasn't it? But obviously, it just kind of feel like even though it was it was a Sony property though as well, wasn't it? 'Cause it was Psygnosis.
Yes, yeah.
Did come out on N64 though.
Yeah, and it came out on the Saturn as well, didn't it?
Yeah, you might be right, actually. Yeah.
Or the original one maybe came out on the Saturn. Yeah, so, yeah, not beyond the realms of possibility that it would have come out on other systems. Because I know that obviously the later games, like the Wipeout 3 and Fusion, they were on PlayStation 2, I think, weren't they? But I think, the original one, obviously, I just think it's probably just a couple of years too early for them to consider bringing it out on the Dreamcast. But now, this is a port by someone who actually did the Doom 64 port over to the Dreamcast a couple of years ago, JN Martin 84, and it looks like it's a work in progress at the moment, but what do you think of this, Joe?
I think it looks good. For some reason my brain instantly went to like, why is he porting the N64 version? But it isn't the N64 version. I believe it is the original PlayStation version. I think Dan's right. It's just by the time the Dreamcast had come out, more Wipeout games had come out and stuff, and it just went. It only came out on the PS2, I think. In the end, I can't remember, but yeah, it looks pretty cool. I'm not a big Wipeout guy. I'm terrible at it. I think whenever I've played it, just because I'm so bad at it, I think I played the demo on the original PlayStation. When I was very young, instantly terrible. Never been good at it. I don't think I've ever finished a race on it. So
it's always been quite a dark game as well, like just with the lighting in there, and I think they've got that well, and the draw distance seems to be really good. But also, I think it comes out on VGA, doesn't it? On the Dreamcast, you can have a VGA output. So
for certain games, it doesn't work on every game, but yeah,
okay.
A lot of them do work on there. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm looking at this, and it has been a couple of years since I played the PlayStation version of this, but to me, it looks a lot smoother in terms of the frame rate, and the speed of it looks quicker as well. I think maybe it's got a higher frame rate on this version of it.
Do you reckon, Joe, with Dreamcast controller, you'd be better at Wipeout?
No, I'd say I'd be better with a PlayStation controller. I don't know if that was a trick question.
But yeah, it is obviously a work in progress at the moment. It's literally only the alpha version of it got uploaded 2 days ago at the time recording this. But if you want to check it out, there is a GitLab page where you can download the files and basically play it on your own Dreamcast if you want to check it out. So it's awesome to see games that never made it out on certain platforms finally making it. Because obviously this guy probably thought it would have been so cool if the original Wipeout was on the Dreamcast. So why don't I make it happen?
Yeah.
Which I always think is amazing.
It's like filling the gaps, isn't it? We're seeing these titles that are coming out on a Dreamcast, and it's like, oh yeah, it would be great to kind of have them, print them out, have a little box and a kind of collection of like new Dreamcast titles. There's so much coming out for the Dreamcast all the time. Yeah. It's insane. And
again, the Dreamcast felt like a cool console, so I think Wipeout feels quite at home on there.
Yeah.
So if you want to get a look at that, I'll put that video and the GitLab page in this week's show notes. Now, the big story, we saved this one till the end because I'm sure Ravi's got a thing or two to say about this one. I was actually chatting to Amiga Bill on his stream about this over the weekend. And this has been something that has really been in demand by so many people for... God, when did the A500 Mini come out now? It must have been like 2 or 3 years ago.
2022.
Yeah, and we actually had the guys from Retro Games Limited on the podcast. We had a bit of a kind of mini launch party for it, didn't we?
Yeah, yeah.
And one of the questions we asked them back then was, would you ever do a full-size Amiga emulation box? Because obviously they did the Commodore 64 Mini, and then they did the Maxi version of that with a working keyboard. And they said to us then that they would like to do a full-size one. They said it probably wouldn't be the Amiga 500 just because of how massive the case is. And if you've ever seen the motherboard in one of their mini systems, it would look a bit crazy having that, as like an eighth of the case space in the corner. But they did say they would like to do a full-size one. Now, it has been announced this week, and it makes sense that it's going to be the Amiga 1200. So that's going to be the system they're going to be doing a full-size Amiga replica of, which obviously wasn't as popular as the A500. But I think given, the only other real system they could have done, I guess, would have been the Amiga 600. And it feels like more people like the 1200 than the 600.
Yeah, it's more popular, definitely.
However, like most things in the world of Amiga, there are some legal problems that apparently have kind of put this on hold for now.
Now, before we go into it, I'd like to know, Joe, like you're a consumer of mini systems, and this is a biggie system coming out from Retro Games Limited. What do you kind of think of this story?
I don't care for the Amiga.
Hates the Amiga.
I don't hate it. I've just got... you know what I was thinking about this week? I am like fully addicted to nostalgia. Like this is what it's all about for me, isn't it? And I don't have any nostalgia for the Amiga. Like I played it twice, I think, in my childhood.
We've tried to get you addicted through osmosis.
You've tried. Ain't gonna happen, we have to give up and admit defeat.
I appreciate it more. Dan lent me his Mini, his A Mini, whatever it's called, and
A500 Mini.
A500 Mini. And I enjoyed it, and I think I played like every single game on there. like for at least a couple of minutes. Some of them I was like, oh, this is horrible. And that's when
Alien Breed 3D you didn't like, did you? I remember.
Stand Alien Breed 3D, and I really wanted to like Alien Breed, but I just got lost. I played Simon the Sorcerer. I was enjoying that, and then my wife sat down and took over and was like, "Oh, I played this as a kid," and my like jaw dropped. It turned out they actually grew up with an Amiga.
Nudge you off, and you couldn't get on it for the rest of the night. Then.
Yeah, pretty much. So is it full size?
Yeah,
So they had the Mini, the A500 Mini. This is like a full size version, basically.
Yeah.
With the working keyboard is the main thing. So obviously the Minis, the keys don't work on them because they're too small.
I can sort of see the market for it, but I can't imagine I can imagine Dan buying one because Dan likes this kind of stuff, but I can't see why Ravi would buy one because Ravi has all this. And I know Dan has it all as well, but
you can never have too many. Come on.
I just don't. Who's it for? It's not for the diehard Amiga fans. It's for the people who grew up on one and see it in the shop and go, "Oh yeah, I had one of them." Yeah,
you do make an interesting point there. Because I mean, I wonder how well the C64 Maxi sold. Because I mean, yeah, you're right. If it's like kind of a casual, someone who just kind of is walking through game and they spot the A500 Mini, it's plug and play. I can play a bunch of games on it.
Yeah.
Would they want a keyboard? Would they care about having a working keyboard that's really only used for the productivity side of the system?
I don't think so when you put it that way.
Because the A500 Mini, I think, sold out pretty much everywhere eventually. So it did very well from what I saw. I haven't got exact sales numbers, but looked like it did very well. So yeah, but I mean, conversely, I hang out obviously in a lot of Amiga Facebook groups and stuff, and everyone's always been asking, when's the A500 Maxi coming out? So I do see a lot of people asking for it, whether it is just guys like me who've got it already, but just want another one.
And I think obviously Retro Games Limited know how to judge a market.
Yeah.
And also the other minis that we've started seeing have come out of known how to judge a market, apart from the PlayStation Mini, which was a bit of a flop, to be honest. But the reason we're talking about this is because, as with Amiga, is embroiled in a lawsuit at the moment. And
legal battles it is.
A legal battle, but this legal battle I think it's been going on for like 14 years or something. It's one of the longest legal battles, which is between Hyperion and Calanto. And to be honest, not interested in picking sides and stuff. I just think it's a bit sad that a mini system is embroiled in a legal battle because the A500 Mini we saw coming out to the shops, which was the first time in many years that we'd actually seen like a proper Amiga or an Amiga product in the shops. And I think, make friends, guys. Just get Amiga stuff out there. I think all of this kind of legal arguments and stuff has just held it back for a long time, and it's kind of sad to see on the 40th birthday that people are still arguing over kind of computer
scraps
of a computer.
I do agree. It's weird though because Retro Games Limited put a statement on their Facebook page, and because obviously the plan was they were going to do a full size Amiga emulation box in quarter one of 2025, was the original announcement. And they put a statement out saying that that's not going to be possible within that timeline. They said ongoing legal disputes between Hyperion Entertainment, they're the company that they recently released Amiga OS 3.2. They've also done like a bunch of Amiga games. They've been around for a long time. So they're basically the operating system guys these days. And the Amiga parties, they say, are preventing us from proceeding with the manufacturing. It said, many of you in the Amiga scene will recall that Hyperion initiated legal action against the Amiga parties in 2018. And in 2019, they even tried unsuccessfully to challenge the release of the A500 Mini.
I don't know. I think it's all a bit messy. They could have just put, we're having legal issues. And everyone would have kind of known what was going on. Because it's no secret that this court case or whatever lawsuit's been going on for years. Absolutely yonks, and it's still not being resolved. I think everyone should just sit down, have a cup of tea, have a chat, have a pint, and kind of work it out.
Well, on the flip side of that, Hyperion actually replied to that Facebook post and said, hang on, you've never spoken to us. We've got no problem with this. So
we don't usually cover drama on this podcast, but it's been absolutely everywhere, this story, and it's kind of, yeah, it's just a bit kind of frustrating for me. I could see the points of like both sides and stuff like that, but I just want to see the console. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I do have a theory about that, because I mean, I was reading that Hyperion have had a big restructure recently. The guy that ran the company before has left now. I think they've been declared bankrupt a couple of times, so they've done a lot of restructuring. So there is like a new team running it now. So maybe they're looking at that and thinking, well, you haven't spoke to this version of Hyperion and the door's open, which, you know, that could be good news that that's all out in public now. Them saying, look, we haven't got a problem with this. So maybe, like you said,
I guess, you know, these companies, lots of them have all been through different companies, you know, these brand names and stuff, like, you know, of all different computers, all different people have owned the rights to games over time. And I can imagine it's just an absolute nightmare developing one of these systems and kind of bringing it back. And a lot of the fans want to. I can imagine it's a nightmare with operating systems as well, stuff like that. So yeah, it's a tough job. And yeah, it's kind of sad to see the disputes, but it's understandable as well, you know. So yeah, let's just hope that something better comes out of the 40th birthday. And yeah, I hope everyone just resolves it, because it's like just literally, it's like, move on, guys, come on, get it sorted.
Well, if RGL and Hyperion can sit down, I mean, I was saying to Bill on his stream that, you know, it would be great. Having a machine with a keyboard means that you can do the productive side of the Amiga. You know, if they can maybe bundle Workbench 3.2 with it and have that as an option.
The sheer joy that I had of just being like, there's an Amiga in the shops. There's an Amiga in the shops, you know what I mean? And then being able to tell people, I don't really care where it comes from, as long as it's a nice one. My personal view is that we should just open source it all and let everyone create them. But you know, other people probably won't think that.
Yeah, there isn't, when there's money to be made. I can't see that happening anytime soon, Ravi, sadly. But I mean, yeah, Joe, you're right. I've got an Amiga 1200 next to me, but will I go out and buy one of these on day one? Of course I will. Because I don't need one at all, but just want one. So make it happen, guys. Come on. So thank you for checking out the news this week. We'll have more for you on next Friday's podcast. Patrons, stand by. We do a couple of extra news stories just for our wonderful patrons on every week's show. A couple of those coming up before we get into our interview this week with Kari Lawler. She's on the way in just a second. Now, just before that, let's take a quick second to give a huge thank you to our longest-running sponsor, and we love them so much. It's our friends at Bitmap Books, and we did actually have the legend that is Julian Jazz Rignall on the podcast at the start of last month, who, of course, back in the day, celebrated games journalist, editor of gaming mags like Zap, CVG, Meme Machines. We used to see him on Games Master with that iconic mullet as well, which Ravi was disappointed to find out he doesn't have anymore, but that's by the by. But he's actually written an amazing new book with a really interesting concept. It's called The Games of a Lifetime.
Yeah, this is really nice because it's a kind of behind-the-scenes look, you know, from a video game writer. And it's in a great, like, timeline format. So he's kind of looking at all the games and, you know, the context that was around them.
And the thing about Julian is, as well, he was like the king of the arcade, really, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah. He had some arcade skills, definitely.
Yeah, national champion he became, and then obviously entered the games industry. He attended all the big launch events and gaming events and visited them as a journalist. So he got a really unique look behind that era of like 8 and 16-bit computers and consoles and the European and UK scene as well. And then obviously he moved over to America. So it's a really interesting book because there are a lot of books out there that just want to chart the history of the industry and certain systems, but that's not what this book about. This is a personal journey. So it's almost like he calls it video game time travel. He takes you back to specific times and places and talks about what it was actually like from his perspective to be there. And,
and he's got some, archival photos, and he's got some box art in there and like vintage arcade flyers and, stuff that really brings it to life.
Yeah, it's just such a fun read as well, and really weighty book as well, 420 pages it weighs in that, so some incredible memories and behind-the-scenes stories. So we're going to get hold of that, have a look at it, and also check out the rest of their retro gaming books as well. Obviously, supporting our sponsors always really helps out the podcast. Let them know that we sent you, if you don't mind. So you get a look at that and the rest of the retro gaming collection. I'll put it in the show notes, but you can click through on their website at bitmapbooks.com. All right, well, thank you for checking out the news this week. More next Friday. And next, we're going to be chatting to our very special guest, going inside the world of collecting, her YouTube channel, retro repairs, and lots more as well, with Kari Lawler. She's next on the Retro Hour podcast. You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and it's time to welcome on this week's very special guest. Now, our guest this week is actually a multi-award-winning entrepreneur, but someone who I'm sure many of our viewers and listeners will know from the incredible retro computing videos that she does on YouTube. To read her description on YouTube, she goes, I'm Kari. I'm just a girl in her 20s who loves sharing my passion for making, fixing, coding and collecting cool retro things. And the channel is her experiences of old computers and video game systems from the 70s, 80s, 90s and sometimes the 2000s as well. And Ravi and I have been loving her channel over the last year or so. So we thought we'd invite Kari on for a bit of a chat about her life and her experience with retro systems. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, really appreciate you taking some time to do some chatting with us about your channel. And I'm interested, because we always like to find out the background of our guests. I mean, what originally got you into computers then? Do you remember kind of your earliest memory where it all began?
When I always say when I was little, my first proper computer was a BBC Micro, which obviously I was born in 2003, so it's like 20 years too late for that. But we always had one just set up in the living room, which was maybe not normal. But I started off I was obsessed with playing Hangman and Chucky Egg on the BBC Micro. So that kind of started me off with the old computers and the sort of simple gaming sort of thing. Learned to program on a BBC Micro. So my first language as well was BBC Basic. Got into that and then sort of moved up into normal computers, normal programming, doing bits and bobs like that. But yeah, I always go back to that was always my favorite one, and I still have it set up so I can play whenever as well. That
was quite random. Why a BBC Micro in the living room in 2003 then?
Yeah, it was my dad's one. So my dad always had a lot of random computer bits around. Everyone always jokes that we're a bit of hoarders even now, just keep everything. So he was one from when he was younger. Oh no, I don't think he was. I think he actually bought it afterwards because he only had a Spectrum in the 80s. He says he really wanted a BBC like they had at school or a Commodore, and his parents only bought him a Spectrum, which obviously maybe not as capable. So he bought one later on. I think he found it at a car boot, and that's why it's like pride of place in the living room.
It's his dream machine he always wanted.
Yeah.
It's a great system to learn on as well, especially if you're doing basic and were there any early kind of, games that you inputted or anything from, any of the manuals?
I used to be, this is when I was very young, so 5, 6, I used to be fascinated by the sort of the 10 print Kari was here, 20 go-to 10. I used to run and just sit there for ages watching it because I felt like that was something unique to basic watching that. I never did that with any of the sort of, that was never a program that you type in like Python or something. But anything like that. I said I used to like word games. I always joke now when you look at the, when I do my, like Osborne computer book videos, most of the games are just like either word games or guess the number games. So it was always typing those ones in and it's some variation on, sort of guessing whatever number the computers come up with because they're never very graphical when you're typing them in basic. So I remember typing a lot of those in. But yeah, the Osborne computer books were sort of ones that I did have and some of the old magazines as well.
Yeah, we'll go into those in a sec. But first, I think your dad and uncle had a 90s computer shop as well.
Yeah.
So what was it like growing up around that knowledge base? And would you be getting like random facts in the house and, them saying, oh, this comes from here and, kind of bit of an education?
Yeah, I think so. So it's more so the stuff as well. Because when the shop closed, my dad did keep a lot of the stuff. So we had boxes from that era, is a lot of PlayStation 1 stuff. So they were CD-ROM importers. So they had a lot of those games, PC games and stuff like that. So just having that access to things. Because I have the Net Eurosi that I use in a lot of videos that people always like.
Yeah, that's a rarity. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
And that's one that they had the dev kit from the shop days. So yeah, having definitely my dad talking about kind of the games and stuff, and he like used to play games a lot as well, which is weird because I used to speak to my friends at school and their dads didn't really game or anything. But I remember some of my earliest memories is like sitting on the end of the bed in his bedroom while he's on his PC, watching him play like Halo, or not the PC, the Xbox, obviously, watching him play like Halo and stuff when I was probably like 6 or 7. So just having that introduction to games, and it wasn't like modern games necessarily all the time. It was always sort of the stuff that he kind of had as well.
Well, it was a really good incentive, net you, Rosie, as well. Giving people the ability to kind of create games on their own. It'd be cool to see that with like a modern console, and getting people kind of involved.
Yeah,
I totally forgot about that.
Yeah. Well, I think I think we've kind of outpaced, maybe, I don't know. I think starting to make a game for the PS5 absolutely terrifies me in scope, I think. Yeah.
It's not really one person job anymore, is it?
Yeah.
No, 200, yeah.
Going back to that computer shop then, what kind of stuff were they selling in the shop, and did they have any kind of good stories that they told you from back then?
Yeah, so it was like PS1 era, some N64 stuff and things like that. They liked a lot of they did a lot of computer shows as well, so they did a lot of traveling. So yeah, it was what tells me about all the different people, because they used to run into all sorts of random programmers and stuff at these shows. So those stories are cool. And then the shop, it's with retail work and the tribulations of that. But they talk about regular customers. They said there used to be a bus driver that used to love the shop and come in, but he used to leave a bus full of passengers for 20 minutes while he came in to browse and buy stuff and then go and take them off.
You mentioned the Usborne computer books as well.
Mm-hmm.
Were they just lying around the house then, or was that something that they got you to get into it?
Yeah, so they were, I like the pictures and colours and stuff, which I think is something we're kind of lacking a bit now with some of the program resources for kids. They're all a bit sterile. And I think having those sort of illustrations in the fantasy world, even if the games didn't always match up to the expectations of whatever illustration was in the book. And I think for like a young kid, because I was going from like picture books and stuff, it's very kind of an easy transition more so. So I remember picking them up because they were just on the bookshelf. We had like a massive bookshelf of random stuff, and they were there, and just trying to explore with them.
Well, I'm interested, you mentioned starting to program on the BBC Micro. How far did you get with that then? Was it typing stuff in out of the manuals initially? I mean, how did you kind of progress with that then? Were you writing programs yourself before long?
Yeah, it was mainly typing stuff in and things, and just there's like muscle memory of learning the logic of programming, and then sort of creating some of my own programs. And again, I never went to any graphics or anything like that. It was always very simple line-based stuff. But I think even when I started learning Python later, so I probably started learning normal programming when I was probably like 11, 12. I think having kind of the logic, because I say programming's just, once you know the logic, you can sort of apply it to any language. Yeah. I think it definitely did help and accelerate how quickly I was able to learn programming afterwards as well.
Did you ever try any 6502 assemblies? You can do that on the BBC Micro in BASIC, can't you? No,
I've seen people talk about, because I talk about programming some of the stuff, and I feel like you should do assembly of, not yet, maybe in the future if I've got a couple of weeks to dedicate.
So tell us about the Satellite Life Challenge as well, because that was something that you got involved with and won really early on.
Space Agency.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was, I think I would have been like 13, 14. So they used to run it. I think it might have ended over COVID. They used to run this challenge, the UK Space Agency, for students to create sort of a idea that they could use technology for to help with things on Earth that would use a satellite. And I pitched an idea for using satellite data for flood prediction. So I created a model and went and pitched it. I got to go to the UK Space Agency and meet like the heads of the ESA and stuff like that. So it was cool experience for connections and stuff. So yeah, I was one of like 10 winners, I think. So yeah, that was quite fun. Having like real life applications of some of the stuff I was doing with the program was cool.
Are you interested in satellite stuff as well? Because I've seen, there's stuff like satellite TV, but also there was a C-64 communicating in space as well, and there was a BBS satellite as well. So there's some kind of retro systems up there.
I think it's just space. Space in general is cool. Like just as a concept, I think everyone always wants stuff to do with space, but I haven't seen that. I have to look that one up. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen some people using like radio transmitters to communicate using retro systems with like the International Space Station.
Yeah.
And stuff, which is like just the coolest thing in the world, I think. So yeah, very cool. I mean, what was it like winning all those awards when you're just starting out then? Because I mean, you kind of hit the ground running there.
Yeah. It was like kind of crazy. I think because I was so young and doing stuff out of the ordinary, I think that's a lot of why people were trying to support me and stuff. And I had a lot of different awards and things early. I always joke that I should have retired because I won a Lifetime Achievement Award at 18. And I was like, they've been trying to retire me already and get rid of me. But that was for services to women in tech and just trying to sort of introduce more women into general tech and sort of spread the message that, yeah, women are in tech and we do stuff like this. Yeah.
Yeah. And you also did a Youth for AI as well, which is really interesting because AI is like the buzzword at the moment. Everyone's talking about it, but like this was 2018 and it was, you know, a bit slower. What was the kind of understanding and, you know, challenges of getting people to talk about AI back then?
Yeah, I think a lot, like you said, AI is like the buzzword now. Back then it was, well, it was still a buzzword that was used a lot. I think it was AI and blockchain. I feel like blockchain feels like an eternity ago now, but everyone was going on about it then.
Everything was blockchain, wasn't it? Yeah.
But I was talking to a lot of people my age because I had just done programming and exploring, and through that I'd ended up on courses on like data science and AI, and I just thought it was really cool. I liked building like image detectors and stuff like I did with the flood detection for the Satellite Challenge. And I was speaking to other people my age and they like thought it was like some crazy mystical thing that they'd never be able to program or do, even though I'd managed to teach myself how to do a lot of the stuff at like 13, 14 online. So a lot of Youth for AI was just about trying to sort of not necessarily teach everything, but just kind of be like, this is kind of what AI is, this is what it's doing, this is how you could get into that.
AI is something that we do talk about bizarrely quite a bit for a retro gaming and technology podcast. Because it kind of feels like, you know, I think personally there is space for it in retro. I mean, I was like messing around with ChatGPT and trying to get it to write a podcast catcher for the Amiga a while ago. And it did a pretty, you know, a good starting point anyway. I mean, what's kind of your opinion on that then? Do you think it can benefit retro gaming and computers for programming, or do you prefer doing it like old school style?
Yeah. I mean, I've had the best experience with ChatGPT from like the retro computing thing, because when I did the video on the converting the basic games into Python, the amount of people in the comments that were like, why have you done this? You can just get ChatGPT to do it. And I put it into ChatGPT and it was literally like gobbledygook. Yeah. Like it just didn't work. And it's so confident, even though it's incorrect, that I think it's kind of scary to a point, because you read it, it's like the new Google, when you search something on Google and Google AI tells you the answer, and half the time it just isn't correct, but because it's the first thing you see, it's like you automatically think that it must be correct because it's there, and it's told me random fake information about computers before. Yeah. So that's what I'm like worries me a bit about it. I think maybe if we get it a bit better. It has different applications and stuff, but at the moment, I'm a bit like...
What do you think about like for graphics and music?
I don't know. It's a weird one, because I think when it's used to sort of support artists and support people who wouldn't like do this stuff anyway, I think. But I think... I don't know. I just don't like the idea of everything being AI generated, even though, and this is coming from someone who like knows how to code a lot of the stuff. But I say, because I've seen like the bad sides of AI and how bad some of the stuff is as well, from like lots of different perspectives. It does make me a bit wary of it.
Yeah, and I think it looks a bit samey sometimes as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, like Uncanny Valley, some of the image generation stuff. It's like everyone's got 8 fingers.
Yeah, yeah.
I saw that they were training Google DeepMind on like retro games. They were using that as
Alpha Zero. And they did a lot of the early training on retro games, because a lot of that's open source. So I did get, I was playing Daley Thompson, and I used some of the open source stuff to train it to always go over the hurdles, because I was really bad at it. So yeah, the retro, it's just because it's simple, repetitive actions in the retro games compared to modern games. It is good for training a lot of the AIs and testing them. Yeah,
I love saving joysticks by using AI. That's always good. Well, let's get onto your YouTube channel then. So, I mean, you uploaded your first video only just over a year ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And, you know, you've had incredible success on there. 82,000 subscribers at the time of recording this interview. A lot of your videos over 100,000 views as well. So tell us why you decided to set up a retro gaming and retro tech YouTube channel then.
Well, I've been posting on Twitter for a while, as in probably retro stuff for at least 3-4 years. So during COVID and stuff, sharing a lot of the computers I was buying, because I was buying a lot of stuff over that time. I think I was bored at home and on eBay a lot. And then when the car boots opened, I just got kind of addicted to buying a lot of consoles, testing them out. And obviously I had my dad who knows a lot of stuff, but I didn't grow up with a lot of this stuff and wasn't that experienced with it. So I found just posting online and like asking questions and getting feedback was really useful. So I grew that to a point on Twitter, and people were telling me to make some videos and stuff, because I've always done like speaking, public speaking, and being comfortable with that. So I took the plunge with the first YouTube video, and then it was the second video that I put up was that Osborne Books video, which got like 300,000 views in 2 weeks or something crazy like that. Never expected it to blow up in that way, and then it's been like a snowball since then.
I find it cool that you also go into car boots as well, because that was like my traditional hunting ground for retro games, and I found as more people became aware of them, like prices increased. So
eBay kind of killed it a bit.
Yeah, because everyone checks the phone. You know?
Yeah, the last few years especially, because it was all right up until this year. It's been not great for the car boots in terms of just insane prices for everything. But
you got to get there early. Did you find any bargains there?
Not so far this year. I have found stuff in the past, and sometimes people don't believe me when I say that I find stuff, because my little brother, he's 17 and he's obsessed with buying Xboxes at the moment. And he's buying like original Xboxes for £5-10, and he plugs them in and they work. And people are like, I can't believe you buy some of this stuff for that price. So you can get stuff. But it's like I listen to my parents because they're always car boot crazy. And some of the stuff that they were getting in the early 2000s from the 80s for like a couple of quid, you wouldn't be able to get that now.
Yeah, the only thing I think I've seen in the last 5 years at a car boot sale, I saw a Sega Master System that was in a puddle on the floor.
Oh, yeah, that's the problem as well.
Yeah.
The good old English weather.
Yeah.
If it's not in a puddle, it's like condensed or it's frozen. The other day, someone's stand, they had like a glass cabinet on it, and it got so cold that there was literally a sheet of ice over the top of it.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, do you find that, though? I mean, that you do pick up some systems that are broken? Because, I mean, you do repairs, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, is that a way to get cheaper items?
Yeah. I think so. Stuff like PlayStations and stuff. If they're untested or broken, like a lot of charity stores, if they have stuff in untested, they will sell it a bit cheaper. But half the time it's just because they can't test stuff, because they don't have the cables and the stuff to test the things. So it is better. Well, not better, but it is cheaper to get them to repair. So that's a lot of the time why I started repairing the stuff, was because I was buying it sort of broken from eBay or vintage recently. I found quite a few bits cheaper on. So I'd be buying big job lots of random consoles that are all even sometimes listed as broken but not broken, which is, you would think that's great, but it's a bit annoying sometimes. I'm like, I'm going to repair a Master System and then it works.
Yeah. You're going to be the only buyer that's disappointed when it works. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Vinted, because someone mentioned that we do a patrons hangout once a month, like all our patrons on a big video call. Someone mentioned a few months ago about Vinted, said, have you looked on there for retro gaming stuff? Suddenly we're all on there and like, I don't know, get it out there to everyone, but there were some bargains to be had on there.
Yeah.
Not sure for how much longer.
Yeah, it's just looking up the weirdest things, because they don't know what they've got sometimes. They'll list stuff, like if you look up like old computer, because they don't know what computer it is. You found like Amstrads and stuff for 20-30 quid because they've just listed it as old computer or something, rather than actually listing what the item is, which you'd think someone would just look at it and just list what computer they've got, but...
Are you also into like vintage tech, just generally, like audio tech and stuff like that? Record tech?
I like my Walkman. I've got a collection of Walkmans. Bought some tapes and a lot of cameras as well. So like early 2000s digital cameras. I went through a phase of buying a bunch of them from charity stores, just because I kind of like the vibe of like flash photography from that era. So yeah.
And actually, you have a limited amount of storage, so that using them, it's actually. Kind of like a disposable one. I've only got this small amount. I've got to make the best of it,
Yeah. And like
or
VHS
erase cameras. Everything, which, VHS
cameras as well.
Oh wow!
I like buying them. Sometimes there's like random tapes, like home videos in them. They're like the weird, not like we had a video of someone's 90th birthday from 1990 something the other day that was just in the VHS tape.
Is this your kind of like where you film your videos? You're in a workshop as well, and you've all got your kind of stuff. Is this like your personal space that you had? Did you have it before the YouTube channel?
Yeah, so we've had the workshop for a while, with lots of different bits and sort of setup and everything, which has always been nice. Having different areas for like building and stuff. So I've always had like the 3D printers and bits like that. And then I've sort of had to clear a bit of a space to do the filming in, which always ends up really messy. Before I film a video, I have to do like a massive tidy up because I've ended up putting loads of stuff on the bench that I'm supposed to film at. But yeah, it's nice having sort of the workshop space rather than sort of clogging up the rest of the house with loads of bits. Yeah.
It's the worst part of doing a video is setting up. it takes like twice as long.
Mm-hmm. And all the tape on the floor with the camera positions.
I'm interested in, obviously, you've got a YouTube channel that gives you an excuse to buy hardware as well, which I think is always good. I've seen the computers that you've covered on your channel, your Moldy Amiga 600 that you got, obviously the A500 that you got in there, the Commodore 16 as well. I mean, what's your collection look like at the moment then? How many systems have you got, and any favourite machines from the ones that you have?
So I don't even know how many I've got. Console-wise, I've got too many. Like we're into probably over 100 random consoles. So I've got a wall in front of me here that is literally just covered in them, and I've got more behind me as well. And that's why I'm trying not to buy duplicates of everything. That's why I try with the computers. I'm trying to sort of spread out. That's why with my Ataris, I've been trying to get one of everything on the 8-bits at the moment. And the 16 bits, which obviously with the rarer ones is a bit more difficult, but I'm trying to think how many different machines I've got. It's definitely over 20. And I think I've always said my BBC Micro is like my prized possession. I really like that one, obviously for the personal connection. But yeah, in terms, and even the Spectrum, I know it's like lovable, even though it's a bit, not the best machine in the world in terms of usability. But I've got 3 of them, and 2 of them broke in the same day. So yeah, I've got to get on repairing those ones.
The thing I like about your channel is as well, you don't like dumb it down. You talk to the audience quite like, high level. And the one you started with was coding like it's the 80s.
Yeah.
That's really interesting because, compared to coding with Python or something like that, it's kind of good to go back and look at it from a different perspective. Do you think it's important to kind of keep the channel on that level?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's no point at making content like that I wouldn't want to watch and engage with. And I think sometimes when the content's a bit like there's either patronizing sometimes, or there's content that kind of feels a bit too sort of showy, shouty sort of vibe, which
or a bit too quick as well. There's some stuff that they just go through it straight away.
People always say that I talk too fast, but or my accent, the Birmingham accent, isn't very agreeable to some ears. But yeah, I think that's what I said. I've always just tried to make content that I would want to watch, and it's good that like other people really enjoy that as well.
Is there any things that you look for? I mean, in your repair videos, anything that you've kind of come across? Because I mean, I've recently, it's something I've always wanted to get better at. I finally bought a solder workstation. Yeah. Been kind of doing some basic repairs. Is there any tips, any things that you look for when you get a new machine in?
It's always recapping. And I feel like whenever you online are like, this doesn't work, or that everyone's always like, have you recapped it? Or even when I just buy new machines in, they're like, make sure you recap the whole machine. And that'll definitely get you good at soldering, because there's a lot of soldering to do there. So that definitely. And then just blown chips, because I had that Apple the other day with the refurb chips. They're notorious, and So yeah, a lot of the stuff you can kind of open it up and sort of visually see, which is nice with the older computers, because if I open like maybe like an Apple Mac, if you can still open them, I know they're making it harder and harder for you to actually repair some of this stuff. But if I open that now, I probably wouldn't even know where to start. But it's kind of nice that a lot of it's very visual, so you can kind of see what the problems are in a lot of machines.
And are you finding it harder to get components, or just having a supply of other broken ones
I
and
try and
stuff.
keep
It's a good way.
supply in. A lot of the components, we're fortunate because of the different, because of the communities and stuff. There is a lot of people still producing components for stuff. Like for that Apple 2, I needed a new keyboard membrane, and there's a guy online that still produces them because he's really into his Apple 2s. So I can order one of them new. It's just having to wait for a lot of stuff because a lot of stuff I need to order from overseas. But I do keep some of the stuff in. But yeah, it's just having so many different sets of different capacitors. But I have got books of sort of ceramic capacitors and stuff that I can use.
I'm interested in your opinion on kind of, the modern retro systems. I speak as someone who at the weekend finally bit the bullet, went on eBay and bought a Mega 65 FPGA system, which I've been eyeing up and drooling over for about 3 years. I'll get one. I've got a Spectrum Next as well. I mean, we've got stuff like, the mini systems, the A400 and the A500 mini. Have you got any of those? And what do you think about that kind of scene, like emulation boxes and FPGA even?
Yeah, I've got loads of them. So like a lot of the ones you mentioned there, which I do have. I do prefer, I think everyone prefers using the original systems. But I think some of them are a bit temperamental. And just having something that's more plug and play and easy to use with HD as well a lot of the time is better. Because even for recording, I do try and record a lot on the original stuff, but sometimes it's just so blurry. And I'm like, yeah, with the emulated stuff, it is just easier to see. So I don't have a problem. I know some people are like purists about their hardware and stuff, but I think if you're playing the games and enjoying the stuff, I don't think there's any problem with what way you're enjoying the games.
You mainly hardware focused then? You don't do any software? Or have you got a software collection?
Yeah, I do like software, but I would say hardware and collecting and sort of more of the visuals. So I kind of, like sort of, like I said, the sort of the having the consoles, repairing them is mainly my focus on sort of collecting them and kind of not archiving them, but keeping my own sort of personal collection of stuff. I think, especially when you see some of the stuff, like you said, in a puddle on the floor, maybe a Mega Drive, I always feel like it's an obligation to rescue the stuff sometimes, which maybe it shouldn't be. It's like that Amiga, the moldy one that my uncle found. I was like, I need to save it and preserve it and play with it, sort of thing. So yeah, I do. Yeah, it's more hardware, I'd say, than collecting a bunch of software.
That was interesting because that was like proper mold as well.
Yeah.
Which you had to have a mask on.
Yeah.
And everything doing that. Was there a point where you thought this Amiga's not going to be able to survive? Like, maybe it's gone too far. I can't say.
When I saw it, I did not think that it would switch on. It shocked me because I got a message. So it was my great uncle that had the Amiga. I got a message from my granddad being like, "Do you want a Commodore?" And he's like, "Your uncle's found one." I was like, "Okay." And then they brought it around wrapped in 3 plastic bags and just put it on my living room floor. So yeah, it was a bit like, I've never seen one in that state before. I don't even know how something gets. I assume it's moisture and mold. Although I think there probably has been computers in worse states than that have been saved. But yeah, it
shows how built to last they were as well. But also, Commodore were notoriously cheap as well. So it's kind of amazing that it's lasted that long.
Yeah. But I do think a lot of them are like indestructible. Like I do think a lot of the stuff that I've got today, like even my iPhone, I'm like, would this be working in 40 years? I don't think so. Like, would I still be able to play on it and stuff? And I think that's what's so cool about some of the older systems, especially when we're preserving them and like recapping and replacing stuff, is hopefully in another 20, 30 years, other people will be able to still use them, which I think today, I don't know, even with games, even having the physical cartridges, CDs and stuff that can still be used. I mean, you look at games that are like streaming only or only digital download only, and it's like, well, when they get taken down in 20 years, no one's actually going to be able to play them anymore. I
actually accidentally reversed my car over an Acorn Electron and it survived.
Oh, God.
So there you go.
I don't even know how that happens.
No idea. Yeah, I mean, my iPhone definitely wouldn't. So yeah, I think you made a good point there. One video that I loved in your channel recently was about anti-piracy, showing 80s DRM, including the infamous lens lock.
Yeah.
So for people that haven't seen that video, tell us a bit about this then and kind of what inspired that video.
So that one was kind of inspired by my dad talking about it. And it's one of those things he mentioned, and I was like, that can't be true. Like, that can't be real. And I watched a few videos on it, and it does seem like the most insane thing ever, especially the lens lock. And you read about the controversy about that and the fact they had to pull a load of games just because of how frustrating it was, and it didn't work half the time.
But for people who are not familiar with it, explain how it worked then, the lens lock.
Yeah, so it was like this little sort of, well, it went on the screen, the game, and there was this extra bit that came in the game box with kind of a screen that you had to view a secret code through. But it wasn't like it showed you the code. It was like the hardest thing to read ever. Because I think in the video, you see me looking at it. I think we did shoot that a few times, and even before, just because it just wasn't showing up. I was so frustrated. I'm going to throw the lens lock at the computer. So yeah, and even the ones with the letters and numbers and trying to read the tiny little things in the manual. And even now, you go on some of the games, it's trying to find the copy protection copies online as well, to try and get into the games, especially when you buy them and the copy protection isn't in the game. Yeah, it's just, like I said, it's like one of those crazy things that I feel if you told most people my age now, it just feels unbelievable.
It was always crazy to me that if you pirated the game and they took that out, you had a better experience than someone who paid money for the game, which was always nuts. Yeah, it's
like a game in itself. Can you actually get into your game?
Would you like to cover like more of that, the kind of background of stuff like keygens and cracking, and then the kind of, you know, copy protection side of it as well, and the like cat and mouse kind of game that they had, you know?
Yeah. I was actually looking at doing like a part 2 for that with some of the cracking and things, because I think it's quite cool. And you download a lot of the emulated games down. There's always the screens when they start with the cracked stuff on there for the different things. So yeah, it is cool. It's a cool exploration. So again, it's something that doesn't really happen now as much. Obviously people crack games, but it doesn't feel as cool or weird as it was back then.
And you're right, also with the emulation, you know, a lot of the games that have been preserved have been cracked, which is kind of crazy that the cracked version is actually out there and the one that's being used. You know?
Yeah.
Didn't I hear that like Nintendo actually used a cracked version of like some of their games for the NES Mini, which is like, yeah, that seems so bizarre. I mean, obviously, like I said before, a big appeal of your channel is kind of seeing these systems through kind of new eyes. You know, you didn't experience them first time round. And, you know, I pick up new systems all the time, and it's always an adventure in itself when you get a new machine that you're unfamiliar with. I mean, is there any places where you kind of do a lot of your research? And so, I mean, for example, on your Amiga 500 video, you had some really detailed GoTech knowledge in that video. I mean, how do you research these videos and gain your knowledge on them?
Yeah. I get controversial because people always moan at me in the comments, but I use a lot of Wikipedia because I find that Wikipedia is like a nice starting point, and it usually has references to jump off of as well. And then I do like to watch a lot of videos and different things as well. For everything, and just finding out background information like documentaries and stuff of everything. I am like a bit of a serial researcher, and it's quite bad actually. I'll be like, I'm going to film the video this week, and then I'll actually spend the week just watching stuff about an Amiga instead. But I try and make I really do put a lot of effort into trying to make everything sort of factually correct, and also make sure that I understand what I'm saying as well. So I'm not just sort of reciting the Wikipedia page. I kind of know what this stuff is.
Are you into like old gaming magazines at all, or computer mags? Because there's a huge archives out there at the moment of like scans of the old stuff, and they're great resources.
I like buying them as well. So I just bought a folder of computer video magazines from the 80s. So I was going through in each of those magazines, I had like a top 10. I don't think it was top 10. It was like a top 40 best-selling games of the month. And just going through them as well and trying to play a few of them but most of them are like the common ones you'd see, and kind of what consoles were popular and the different things, and programs as well. So typing in, that was another video I was working on as well, was kind of coding like it's the 80s but from magazines, because I think there's always a different vibe to some of the books.
Yeah, there was a lot of them that had like, you know, games that they did, but also there was a lot of tutorials, like coding tutorials in the back, and they were actually really well written back then.
Yeah, they were, and the graphics and like the typeface. Like I said, I always like the visuals of a lot of this stuff, especially from the 80s. Because that's one of the things I don't like about stuff now. I always think everything's a bit subdued. Whereas a lot of the stuff in the 80s was just like shamelessly in your face and bright and colourful.
Garish. Yeah.
Garish. But like, that's what I like about a lot of the stuff. So just flicking through it. And looking even at the old adverts, which was sometimes crazy. So yeah, I do the old magazines are a really good resource. I said just for like fun reading as well as a history archive. Yeah, I really enjoy them.
You mentioned about the liking the aesthetic of retro systems and games as well.
Yeah.
I mean, would you ever consider making a Spectrum or a Commodore 64 game or something and releasing it?
Yeah, it's something I've been looking at doing. So I was looking at like the C64 Basic and things to make like a little game. But a lot of stuff is like assembly. As I said, assembly is not one that I've touched yet. So I would like to and kind of create like a little cover because I really like a lot of their hand-drawn covers as well. As I say, they never have, well, they sometimes do, but a lot of the time they don't really ever seem to have much to do with the actual game that's inside the thing because the graphics
they're there to sell you the game on the shelf.
Yeah. So yeah, that would be cool in the future.
It was good to see you mentioned the Apple II video as well. Like, good to see you getting into the Apple II, but also power supplies, which is an area that I would never delve. I'm totally scared of them. Like, what are the considerations that are needed when you're using, like pieces with high voltage in and, big capacitors and stuff?
So with that Apple, I like purposely didn't plug it in. Because I just assumed as well when they sent it to me, probably hopefully hadn't been switched on for a while. And I had it for a week or two. So tried to make sure it wasn't charged and then just making sure I didn't put my hand over the really zappy parts, which luckily even back then in the power supplies, they are quite well sort of identified. There's usually a lot of caution signs because Apple II did basically say you risk, there's a sticker on it that's basically said you risk death if you open this up. So it is sometimes a bit nerve wracking. I do think if I touch something, but I don't think it'd be that bad of a shock when it's been off for a few weeks. Obviously I wouldn't plug it in and then start messing around in the power supply. But yeah, it's just trying to be slightly mindful of this stuff, but I think there's still a little bit of risk.
Would you ever consider working on like cathode ray tubes, like CRT monitors? Because I asked this because Ravi's written that question in. I know he's got a CRT graveyard he's trying to get someone to repair.
Not yet. The CRTs are a funny one. I have like massive collection of them because I use the Sony CRT in my videos. And I really like
the
that
one with the big border on it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I found one of them at the car boot the other day for £3. So that was shocking. We snapped that up straight away. But yeah, I haven't repaired one of them yet. I think that feels like, even though it is like electronics and stuff, it feels like a completely different thing than the computers. I don't even know where I'd start with that. How you've ended up with a bunch of CRTs to repair?
Well, I was just collecting them and they all just started going pop,
ones,
pop. And then I was like, right, that's out of commission. And now I've got a big pile. Yeah. It's not good. I was wondering if there's any channels that, got you into doing videos on YouTube as well, that you follow.
I watch a lot of like the sort of British retro ones. So I always talk about like my research and stuff. I really like Kim Justice for sort of the documentary
Kim's wicked,
and things. And then other repair videos and 3D printing stuff like that as well. I feel like I'm wrong with that because there's like so many different ones and things.
And there's like a satisfaction to seeing someone getting something working as well, which is like as much as it's satisfying watching someone, jet wash some slabs or something. Like, there's an end result which is like, this works, it's clean, it's good. Yeah.
Have you had any like failures on your channel, like when you're making a video and just can't get something working and you've abandoned the video?
Luckily not yet, which has been nice. The PlayStation video that I did was very close to not working. I think I ended up like the screen wouldn't turn on at one point. I turned it on just to check before I filmed a bit, and it just wouldn't turn on. And I panicked because I was like, if this doesn't work, then I've filmed like the entire video. But luckily it did work in the end. But nothing as of yet that has completely failed on me. I've had a few close calls, but yeah, like I said, been lucky, especially since some of the stuff is temperamental. I said the Spectrum, I think when I was doing the copy protection video, that's when the Spectrum, I left it on when I went to go for lunch in the house, and it sort of exploded. Something must have burst towards it just wouldn't turn on. Plugged the second one in, didn't turn on, even the Spectrum that had worked for ages. So I had to run round to my uncle's and borrow his to actually finish the video off. So that was a close call as well, but we got it sorted in the end.
What do they think of your channel as well? They must enjoy it, and you know, seeing you getting all of this stuff going. And do they ever come round and nick a console or anything?
Yeah, a lot of my family, my nan and granddad watch every video, and they're like, we think it's great, because they remember a lot of this stuff. Like my granddad remembers his Spectrum and stuff. My parents, I always ask my dad for help on stuff sometimes. Like, oh, do you remember this console? Or do you know how to do this? He's like, how the hell would I know that? It's like something random. But yeah, they like it. I think sort of this content being sort of memories as well for them. It's kind of cool to see me doing it from their perspective, I think, as well.
One of your videos I really enjoyed watching, and I kind of knew what the fault would be before you even got to that stage in the video, was the Commodore 16 video that you did at the end of last year. As the Plus 4, which was a Commodore 16's kind of system machine. Yeah. Was my first computer, and yet a lot of them now have got the failed CPU and black screen on them as well. Yeah. And it's great to see you getting that up and running. I mean, what did you think of the Commodore 16 then, from your experience with it?
It's always like the sort of forgotten siblings. Sometimes some of these systems are. So I like exploring these ones and kind of engaging with the ones that are maybe a bit less loved. That's what I said. I think I have my affinity, even though obviously everyone loves the Spectrum. I have my affinity for that because everyone always, I would say it's like bullied a bit. People are mean to it. So I feel like I do have a closer connection with some of these systems. Yeah, and I like engage, those ones that aren't as popular, even though everyone loves the C64.
I think the C16 looks cooler as well, doesn't it, in like jet black? Yeah,
I much prefer that. Was the Spectrum, so I much prefer the black systems. I don't understand beige. I will never understand the obsession with beige. Apparently it was, my dad always said it's to like blend in with the home. If everyone had beige homes, apparently. But yeah, not a fan. I do prefer the black systems. And I think there's a reason why nothing's beige anymore.
Yeah, they don't go yellow as well, the black systems, which is a good thing.
Would you ever do any like Archimedes stuff as well?
Yeah.
Or any Acorn?
Yeah, so I've got Acorns and stuff. So BBC Micro was my favourite. So the Acorns. I need to explore more of that because I've got some in my collection. That I've kind of they've not been touched. They've been a bit unloved. So I say, trying to expand and branch out into maybe some of the more niche and rarest, well, not rarer, but more underserved computers in sort of the what's on YouTube at the moment.
Yeah, I think the Acorn Archimedes is a really interesting platform. I mean, obviously kind of the ARM processor came out of that. So it was like the foundation of that. And I did a video on my YouTube channel a few years ago comparing the Acorn Archimedes and the Amiga. And actually, because I mean, I use the Acorn Archimedes at school as just like a, general kind of word processing machine, that kind of thing. Didn't have any idea how powerful it was in terms of graphics and audio. And actually, in some ways, it was better than the Amiga for some games. So
it's pretty cool. So, it's like the Amiga. Because I've never really had an Amiga up until when I started YouTube, and we had the few, and just seeing the capabilities, you see the difference in capabilities between what was coming out in the early 80s compared to the Amiga's 87, the Amiga 500. The sort of graphics it's just insane, the jump in those few years. So I did have fun playing around with the Amiga and the Atari ST as well. I sat and played SimCity for way too long on the Atari ST.
But the weekend's gone. Yeah. You've been there.
Have you gone to any events, or do you plan to go to any like retro gaming?
I'm planning to go to a few more. I've been to I went to Birmingham Gaming Market last year, and some around Birmingham and things. It's just planning and getting to things and stuff like that. But yeah, I definitely want to go to more events and sort of engage more.
That's a busy, rammed one, isn't it?
Birmingham. Yeah, I think they've had to do a bigger venue this year. So it was like a fire hazard last year. Even the custard factory, it was, yeah. But yeah, hopefully more events and kind of meeting people and discussing more in person. But I said YouTube's gone so quickly. It felt like once you start a video, it feels like the time is just spinning. So yeah, finding the time to sit down and plan and what I want to go to.
How long do your videos normally take to put together? Are they quite time intensive?
Yeah. Obviously depends on the video. But I have like the planning stage and the research stage because I like to sort of kind of play around with whatever consoles, either through emulators if it's not working, or read about it and watch videos. So they're taking longer now. When I started, I was putting one a week, which was just unsustainable with everything else. And just making sure they're all well researched and well done. So at the moment, I'm kind of not really sticking to a schedule because I think I'd rather put out a video that I'm like happy with and that I know everything's correct and it's well edited and stuff. So yeah, they do take a bit longer, but I think I'm like a lot happier with the content at the moment.
Yeah, it sounds a lot better than rushing them and just to get out on a certain day. Yeah, 100%. Well, Kari, honestly, we love your channel. We love anyone that's keeping these retro systems alive. Anything planned that is coming up over the next couple of videos? Anything you got in the pipeline at the moment?
So my next video is going to be more gaming focused. And then after that, I've got a PlayStation repair that is in the works. So that's the next 2 videos, hopefully, on the channel.
Fantastic. Well, for anyone that hasn't watched it, obviously I'll link up the channel in the podcast show notes so people can click straight through. And been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on and being our guest this week.
Thank you.